We are going to start paper 1 part B. That is basically the major term is human geography. Right? Now, in the broader perspective, first we'll try to differentiate between physical geography and human geography. How it is different, how human geography is different from physical geography. Any idea?
So application part, which is more connected to human being, their eating habits, their living style, their habitation pattern, all that depends on physical geography can be attributed to human geography.
So let's say talk about the dietary habit. Right. So that's a part of geography or that's a part of anthropology?
It's not audible.
Sorry?
It's not audible.
Okay. You can come on the front side.
How geography is affecting dietary habits, that will come under human geography.
That will come under
Human geography.
human geography, right? And if you look at physical geography, that is primarily about the physical features. Right. So when you talk about physical features, that is the landforms, that's the climatic aspects, and several other aspects related to physical geography. And human geography, how obviously humans have occupied this space. While writing an answer, you must have clarity over it. Can we really separate it? In the present context, no, but in the past, it can separate. Is it possible to separate it in the present context also? No? So how Antarctica is being influenced by humans? Or how Antarctic influences the human?
By the formation of polar fronts, and that directly or indirectly affects the onset of monsoon.
So when we understand, let's say, global air circulation, atmospheric circulation, then humans can't be separated from that.
Both are very intimately related to each other, both affects each other.
Like whatever is happening on Antarctica may affect equatorial region also.
Melting of ice in Antarctica will lead to sea level rise, which will affect.
So obviously it will affect it. So that's a modern concept. Now just imagine geography in 15th century. Imagine geography in 5th century.
That time it was only finding sea routes and land area. That's it.
Right? So there is a very interesting story about the evolution of geographical thought or geography as a discipline. There are a good number of students from different discipline and sitting in a seminar. So one called that when the introduction took place, so I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a philosopher, I'm a historian. One guy told I'm a geography. So everybody was explaining. So when say that I'm from geography background. Oh, you mean to say that the names and places. Right. So obviously it hurts the ego. Names and places. So what is geography all about? First we need to understand what is geography, what geographers are supposed to deal with. Is it purely the names and places, or it is far more than that? Far more than that? Obviously that's we have already discussed and you must have experienced so many things. For example, settlement pattern. Settlement pattern has its influence of physical aspects, right? When you go for planning, let's say economy, so resource distribution itself is affected by geographical factors. Even if we exclude geography as a part of integral part of humans, physical factors will have its impact on economic factors. Physical factors will have its impact on social factors. right? So that way geography becomes a multifarious subject, and you derive information or content from different sources, and the moment we derive content from different sources, it becomes complex, and the complexity is continuously increasing. When we talk about human geography, actually here we deal about the man-environment relationship. Right? Now, what is the role of a geographer? For example, if we are purely talking about man, let's say evolution of races, so that becomes an integral part of anthropology, right? When you talk about any other, let's say suppose if we are talking about industrial activities, that becomes a part of economy, right? Whether it is global economy or microeconomic pattern, that's a different issue. What is the role of geographer? That in the relationship, man-environment relationship, whether man is active one, is an active agent, is a passive or neutral agent, or is a combination of both. Right? That has been debated. Right? Man as an active agent or passive agent is basically what you call determinism. The philosophy of determinism. That means environmental aspects controls human behavior or human activities. That is passive. Man is not that active. Is it true, false, or partly true, partly false? Can be debated. Right? For example, the people of ancient time, again let's say talk about the our Indus Valley civilization, or if you are talking about Greek civilization, the people must have been in much harmony with the nature, and nature would have been far, far dominant as far as the human activities are concerned. But if you see the 20th century or 21st century humans, they are far more active. Right now we have reaches up till the polar region. We have made much economic progress even in the desert areas. We have started exploiting resources from the ocean bed which were not even known to the ancient people, except the ocean water as a route of trade. There is no utilization of oceans. Right? So man-environment relationship, if you see, that is a very dynamic entity, very, very dynamic, and has evolved through ages to reach the present level. Hence, it is very complex. This complexity is going to increase further. So what is the role of the geographers? To reduce that, right? So basic role of geographer here is to reduce, explain through interrelationship and intrarelationship of various elements. Now in that question, first comes whether environment again is an active one, is a passive one, or both, or a mix of both. So if the present human environment relationship, if you see, is it really active or passive or both? Both, right? In the past it would have been active. Environment was active. Man was passive relatively. But gradually in the medieval period, and the later on environment was active, men were also becoming active. In the later phases of, let's say, 18th, 19th and 20th century, men were far more active, environment were really considered as relatively passive, right? Because you can create every counter element, whatever environmental restraints are there, right? So that's where when you see it is active, it becomes possibilist. The theory of possibilism, the philosophy of possibilism. When it is both, that becomes a very good example is stop and go determinism. That is, we can say neo-determinism also. For the understanding, proper understanding of man-environment relationship, first we should learn, obviously, what is man. Hope we all know that. When we say man, that's humans right now. Now, when we talk about environment, what is environment itself? What is environment? Surroundings. Whatever surrounds you. So it's basically the relationship between man and the space and the region where they are living, right? So if we look at the environmental aspect, whether environment is objective or subjective environment, that is real environment or perceptual environment, right? So visible reality of the geographical features, is it simply a visible reality of geographical features or the way those features are perceived? So human behavior is dependent upon perceptual environment or real environment. Perceptual environment or real environment? Real environment. Let's say suppose the distance. Distance is a reality. Physical distance between two places is a reality, right? So let's say suppose a distance of 1000 kilometers. Now there is a very interesting part how geography is different from that. What is the nearest distance between 2 points in science? A straight line. That is all the fact engineers, right? What is the nearest distance between two places on the surface of the earth for a geographer? Yes, it will always be a curve, right? So in the space it is true that the nearest distance between 2 points will be a straight line, but on the surface it will always be a curve, right? Because if you draw a straight line between 2 points, you have to pass through the earth, inside the earth, because earth is curvature. So whatever small curvature is there, so for geographers, this is the perspective I am talking about. For geographers, the nearest distance between 2 points is not a straight line, rather it is a curve, right? Which science will deny it, right? But for geographers it's true. So let's say suppose if you're talking about the physical distance of 1000 kilometer, that remains a physical reality for every society. Right? Imagine the physical distance of 1000 kilometer for a tribal society, an American society, Indian society, the poor people, let's say suppose a labor, an Ambani. So distance of 1000 kilometer for Ambani is just kind of having a cup of tea, right? For a labor class, it may need maybe 1 year planning, even if they are going with the public transportation, which is relatively well developed in the present day world, right? 1000 kilometer distance in medieval period and 1000 kilometer distance in ancient period, right? So it is basically the perceptual environment which dominates. Now in this sense we cannot deny the role of real environment. That's where we have conflicting ideas, that's where we have different perceptions, and that's why we have different thought. When we talk about from geographical perspective, that's why we have different ideas, and that's how each idea, howsoever conflicting, howsoever with maybe full of flaw, may be there, but it has its own contribution in its own way in the evolution of a subject, in better understanding of man-environment relationship. So when you start your answer, that aspect must be there, right? If you look at the role of this area, very difficult to prepare, right? Because we have very vague way of presentation of this paper, especially paper 1 part B. Even if you look at settlement, if you look at models and theories, if you look at economic geography, primarily perspective in geography, it is not very well understood. For example, if you read radicalism, and if you have question on radicalism, and if you are not mentioning about the Naxalite movement, your answer is incomplete, and no book will tell you about Naxalite movement. When you are talking about behavioralism, and if you are not talking about geopolitics, that means you have not understood the term. If you are talking about dualism and dichotomy, now dualism and dichotomy, you read 100 books, they will give you 5 dualism and dichotomy. That means you have not understood the term or the topic as a would-be IS officer, because academician will look geography from a different perspective. An IS officer, would-be IS officer, is supposed to see geography, or for that matter any subject, in his or her own perspective, which is required, which is the need for a would-be IS officer, and that will make your answer different from the college going writers, right? So that dominates the approaches of understanding of man-environment relationship. Without completely denying the role of a real world. Now, what should be the approaches? Let's say suppose if you are assigned a task to explain the man-environment relationship, what are you supposed to do? Let's say whether man is active, if active, up to what extent man is active, if environment is active, up to what extent it is active, right? How would you approach? What will be the approach? How would you learn that?
Taking an example.
Let's take example. For example,
Coastal regions.
Coastal regions. Okay. Go ahead.
In the month of monsoon,
Sorry.
in the month of monsoon, coastal regions, when there is not the very extreme most of the time, so the trading is closed,
Or relatively less.
relatively less.
So if the climate is active or man is active?
Climate is active.
Climate is
Active.
active or influencing.
Influencing.
So it completely stops the activities in that area? No? Right? Even in the harshest climate, we do have activities going on. Right? So basically, there are two approaches, and that has been the debate, and most of the topics will be basically the crux or just offshoots of these two approaches. First is what you call regional approach. Like for example, if we have areal differentiation, say regional synthesis, the system analysis, right? So there are different approaches. So either regional approaches and systematic approach. To learn man-environment relationship. And throughout the evolution of geographical thought, these two approaches has dominated. And the debates have been on whether regional approach, how far regional approach, a combination of systematic and regional, is it possible to combine that, has been going on, and you will have several geographers which would be backing one or rejecting others, which might be, one might be backing the second one and rejecting the first one. What do you mean by regional approach? Regional approach, when you divide Earth part by part and study the man-environment relationship, it is called regional approach. For example, the most important one is Vidal de la Blache, a French geographer who for the first time tried to talk about pays. Pays is a term in French that means a segment of Earth. It doesn't mean that he was the founder. Right. For example, compage was the term used by Whittlesey. He talks about sequent occupants. The same, but compage is basically a region. When normal aspect apart from that, when he introduced ecological aspects. Like for example, when you read geographically or deal a question like why Delhi is more polluted than the other metropolitan cities of our country. So it is pollution. Pollution is basically ecological aspect, right? The moment you talk about the pollution of Delhi, which is slightly higher as compared to 3 metropolitan cities, that means you will be talking about the location. Delhi is located in the interior of the country, whereas the rest of the 3 metropolitan cities are located in coastal areas. You are talking about geography. When you talk about in the interior location, the rate of weathering and erosion is slightly higher because of temperature contrast or higher range of temperature, right? So the dust particles and all will be higher. So you are talking about geography. The pollution level is exclusively an aspect of ecology, right? But if you look at the human activities, since we are more associated with real estate, so real estate, just like when it's very general statement will be real estate के वजह से pollution दिल्ली में ज़्यादा होता है. Can't we see the same growth of real estate in other metropolitan cities? They are growing in that cities also. What Kolkata was in the 50 years back, it is not right now the same. The same is true about Mumbai and Chennai. Delhi is also growing, so all the other cities also growing. As far as the buildings are concerned, you have good number of skyscrapers in all the metropolitan cities. Why Delhi is more polluted? Let's say when you talk about the condition of women in Delhi as compared to the rest of the metropolitan cities, right? That is purely anthropogenic aspect, that is social aspect. That's mainly you deal in sociology. But a sociologist will have a different explanation for it. A geographer will have different explanation, right? Sociologist will talk more about behavioral aspect, more about human nature, more about poverty. But a geographer will talk about the surrounding area, agriculture. Agriculture dominated society. Male chauvinism is far higher. Sex ratio is relatively poor. So ultimately you are talking about geography. When you talk about why this region is agricultural dominated, sorry? So green revolution in Punjab and Haryana, why not in Tamil Nadu and Kerala? So this green revolution, when we are talking about, purely it is agriculture. Green revolution is a very recent phenomena. When you go into the historical evolution of society, so that is agri dominated. Agri dominated society will have relatively more patriarchal society, deep rooted patriarchal society. The mind or the attitude of the people will be more conservative, inward looking. And that agriculture society is primarily because the whole area is a plain region, right? And that the moment we talk about plain, pure physical geography. Hope we are getting, right? So in that sense, when we talk about regional approach, or let's say suppose the ecological aspect, when we talk about Campage, it is nothing but regional geography. But when you include the ecological aspect of that region, in understanding the man-environment relationship, it becomes Campage. When you use a segment of earth for planning, it becomes space, right? Sequent occupants, that's the same evolution. For example, like you must have heard about ecological succession, right? The species succession, like primary, secondary and all. When you talk about the cultural landscape, in sequential evolution of a cultural landscape, that becomes sequent occupants. Like for example, in our country, what is the sequent occupants? That is economic. I am talking about the sequent occupants in terms of evolution of a society. Yes, we start from Indus Valley civilization. Even before that, there must be some food gatherers, hunters and all, which may not have very well written history about them. So our basic history starts with the Indus Valley civilization. Because we have a lot of evidences about that. Look, just think about the wanderers, food gatherers before that. We don't have historical evidences about that. We don't have written documents about that. So we don't mention that. So thereafter, Indus Valley civilization would have started. After that we have Aryans. Then after that we have Mughals and Turks and all. Then after that we have Britishers. So sequential occupants of an area. Right? Now man-environment relationship is, if you look at Aryans, why did Aryan came to India? Agricultural activities. Because at that time agriculture was the most dominant activity of human, right? So thereafter when they started coming, they would have come first in the deserts of the Central Asia. So obviously when they started migrating, so they would have found the most fertile land from the Mediterranean, between the Mediterranean and India. So the most fertile land would have been the Ganga plain, right? So they came. Imagine the people who are coming from Afghanistan and Iran would have found Indus and Ganga like treasures, गेटिंग दैट? जो आदमी पानी के लिए भटक रहा हो, अचानक उसको पानी का पूरा ये मिल जाए, पूरी नदी की नदी मिल जाए, राइट? You can understand the religious evolution also. Why Ganga is considered as mother, right? So that sequential occupance, cultural occupancy is somehow related with geography, right? So that all the debate to understand this man and environment relationship is the crux of the part of human geography. Whenever you write an answer, this must be there in your mind. It should not be just reproduction of whatever you have read in the books, because that then you are becoming more academician. You are not supposed to produce a theory here. Rather, you are supposed to apply the theory as a would-be IAS officer, as a thinker, right? As a man who is going to, or woman who are going to apply those knowledge in dealing with the solutions of the problems, to find out the problems. I have told several times, for example, if you are a DM of a Haryana area, right, and coming from outside the plain area, right, how would you perceive Khap Panchayat? As an IAS officer, your perception will be different. As a human right activist, your perception will be different. Right, as a law enforcing agency, your perception would be different. This is what you call perspective in geography. The first topic which we are going to deal with. What do you think about Khap Panchayat? Haryana as a region I am talking about, and I am taking one aspect of it. The existence of Khap Panchayat in 21st century in a country like us. We are not Rwanda, Burundi, Somalia, or even Middle East or the West Asia.
Society has devised a process to deal with this problem because law enforcement is not that better. Whatever they got after independence. So it continues.
IPS officer from Haryana will be offended from this statement.
Society at that place has still not evolved. It is still not in place with the modern day technology or modern day ideas.
So the same is true about UP, Bihar. Northeastern states are relatively less evolved than Haryana. Yet the problem, social problem in Haryana is far more severe.
The thing is about society.
Yeah.
So society is still insulated,
Mhm.
despite of this reason being very much close to NCR.
So question is why?
Because they are dependent more on primary activity of agriculture. So they want the authority to dictate the terms. Means they can be because the Khap Panchayat exclusively has male members and they are primarily associated with this primary activity.
So as an administrator, when you are going to deal with the problems of Haryana, you are supposed to understand and learn the root cause of it, right? As a geographer, it gives you perspective to understand that, right? Any society which is dominantly receiving their economy from primary activities would be inward looking. Any society which is dominant in primary activity would be having primarily a role of physical features of that area.
So it's common feature that wherever there is a agriculture society, it will be inward and it will be patriarchal. There is no other this the opposite is now.
So it can't be said. It can't be so that if the society is agrarian, it is going to be very patriarchal in nature. That cannot be.
Society, as far as nature is concerned, the society has made nature patriarchal. Nature itself has made society a patriarchal one.
Many other factors are playing into the
Definitely. But what is the primary factor?
Politics,
Politics.
media, they all have a role to play.
That's true. What is the fundamental factor? Media for the whole country is the same. Political system for our country is same, yet we have regional variations. So what are the root causes? You are talking about the common factors. What are the root causes for that? For example, if we compare northern plain, take northern plain as a region, compare it with peninsular plateau, compare it with mountainous region. Himachal is the most ruralized state of our country, yet they are far more socially uplifted society. Despite the fact that they lack resources, the richest resource region of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, Chota Nagpur plateau, is relatively socially very, very underdeveloped. What is the role of geographer?
हिल्स और इस पे तो मैट्रियार्कल वुमेन डोमिनेटेड है उत्तराखंड एंड हिमाचल.
Why?
वो एग्रीकल्चर डोमिनेटेड होने के बावजूद भी वो
economic
वुमेन्स आर डोमिनेटेड.
Huh?
Women's dominated.
Tribal people have much more balanced social aspect in terms of matriarchal or patriarchal. Yes, sorry.
In the northeast also,
Mhm.
family is still women dominated.
Yeah.
Patriarchal society.
So is about Andaman Nicobar Island. So is about Jarwar tribes. So is about most of the tribals of the central India.
What has development is what development does with us and what with them. Is it good for us or bad? Development, we are the residents of the plain area. We are developed.
Hmm.
Still patriarchal.
No, what development has to do with patriarchy? You will have to understand that.
So it is basically because of the activities that dominate and which is more influenced by the geography of the region.
So, like in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh area, there is more adverse climatic conditions, and in hilly areas also. So they have to, whole family has to put together all the efforts to deal with the situation. Whereas in the plain area, when we see agriculture is not that difficult, like they don't face that much difficult situations. So here, one person can dominate over the others.
So why West Asia then?
No, sorry, hills पे तो शराब पी के पड़े रहते हैं और औरतें काम करती हैं पूरा.
नहीं नहीं, ये एक मिसकंसेप्शन. शराब पी के पड़े रहते होंगे तो वहाँ पे सोशल कंडीशन अच्छी नहीं होगी. अगर किसी भी एरिया में
कंडीशंस हिल्स पे
नहीं, वो एक स्ट्रक्चर्ड ओपिनियन है. देयर इज अ डिफरेंस इन द एक्चुअल रियलिटी एंड स्ट्रक्चर्ड ओपिनियन.
In West Asia, if we are saying religion plays an important role.
Okay.
Because there are a
Why?
mix of factors. Cannot-
That's the misunderstanding. That's the fundamental misunderstanding which an intellectuals or a would-be IAS officer should not commit. For the people who are having discourse on chai stall, tea stall, that's fine. But for a would-be IAS officer, ये इससे बाहर निकलना पड़ेगा आपको. What is the problem in that? What is the role of religion in making that society?
People have themselves as actually made women should do this, men should do this.
Okay.
So that may be a factor.
So why North Indian fathers are so cruel as compared to South Indian fathers, who don't send their daughters to schools and educations, and the sex ratio is very poor, where a father of northern plain, most probably the Haryana and Punjab, would love to go for female ferticides as compared to the southern plateau region.
That's what I'm saying. Society itself is developed in a complex way. We cannot comment that this single factor is responsible for this.
No, that is responsible for that. That's the fundamental understanding. That's where you have to learn the basics of it. All the society of the world, across the religion, across the region, you will find one similarity, that which is dominantly receiving their economy or driving their economic or livelihood from the primary sources will be inward looking, will be conservative, will be orthodox. Now, higher you go in that pedestal, the society will be more matriarchal. The society will be more religious. The society will be more orthodox and inward. जैसे पर्शियन में कोटेशन है मी चुनी दी ग्रे नीस्त, यानी कि हम ही तोप हैं, जिसे पेदरम सुल्तान बूद का एक कॉन्सेप्ट है. आई एम द बेस्ट, नोबडी एल्स इज बेटर देन मी, राइट. सो वहाँ से वो कॉन्सेप्ट डेवलप होता है, इवॉल्व होता है. वी आर बेस्ट बिकॉज वी हैव so many resources. We have so many resources because we are chosen by God. Since we are chosen by God, nobody can be better than us.
That's what a person is thinking now. How is society, geography has influenced this?
Okay, how has?
Geography.
First, let's talk about why the situation is there. Right. So, is it purely society? It's like you were talking about the media. Why the attitude itself of maybe Haryana and Punjab or people of West Asia is like that? Look at here. If you talk about the sex ratio in our country is worst in a particular region dominated by Green Revolution.
Yes.
Can you have a correlation? The moment you correlate, your answer will be the best one. If you can't correlate, it will be bookish one.
Green Revolution, where there was more machinery.
No,
and
more.
yes,
Not machinery, it's basically
the
about
machinery came up.
bumper production, agricultural production.
Why did you get bumper production?
Because
And there
of
is
fertilizers and agricultural seeds, not machinery.
yes, there is agriculture in your eastern UP and Bihar as well. No?
No, but the
Yeah, that's the intra-regional variation we'll have to look into.
Yes.
If you look at tribal economy is the most nature dependent economy.
Because the
Yet they are better in terms of sex ratio.
Punjab and Haryana people were already well off because and they could buy the latest seeds and
can afford.
irrigation was much more developed in here because of the presence of the rivers.
No, that's a micro aspect. I'm not talking about micro aspect because any society evolves through historical perspective. It's not a one-day game. Maybe it's not a game of 20 years. What you see Haryana and Punjab, it is the attitude which has been founded over the years
Yes.
and the consequence of it in the present day.
So why it developed like this in the personality?
Sorry?
Why it developed like this, like patriarchy developed?
The patriarchy is developed basically.
Actually, in Haryana, we see generally the history, if we perceive this problem from the historical point of view, then Haryana is mainly dominated by the Rajputs. Means, Rajputs and Kshatriyas.
No, Haryana is not there. That's what you are going on a topic which is totally different. हम कास्ट की बात ही नहीं करते हैं. कास्ट इज वेरी मतलब फुल ऑफ फ्लॉ थिंग.
What I'm saying, it is a northwestern part of our country.
Mhm.
That was the main place.
Fine.
Which mainly accommodated most of the coming foreigners.
Okay.
Most of the time these foreigners from the Central Asia,
Mhm.
they were invading, and they were kind of very much patriarchal in nature because they were mainly engaged in fighting wars.
No, Rajputs were much more engaged in fighting
Yes,
wars.
sir, that is the reason, sir. What
So
I'm
see,
saying.
Rajput have
Afterwards, sir,
Rajputs are just let me put it that way.
That was these were the people which afterwards came under the during the Brahmanical period. So these were the people, these were the group of clans. They were later on termed as Rajputs or Kshatriyas. So
No, again, but that's why I'm saying it is good. Just listen to me. It is good only for the discussion of the non-intellectuals. You are taking a very myopic view of it.
it is in history.
Okay, let me.
It is in history, sir.
Yeah, that is in history. I'm not denying the history. What I am talking about, history has a role to play, not in terms of who came to us or invaded us, or which part has been invaded more. If you look at the way you're talking about the wars and all, Rajputanas, the Rajputs of Rajasthan has dominated as far as wars from the Indian natives in the medieval period is concerned. Look at Marathas. Look at Tipu Sultan in the South India. Look at the Vijayanagar Empire and all. They have all dominated, they have all been invaded. As far as invasion is concerned, the western coast had been invaded the most as compared to this. And if you look at western states, they are far, far more developed than eastern states. Despite
What's the question exactly?
So that is. Sir, that
the question is patriarchal, a region. When we are talking about geography, regional approach. I'm just dealing with regional approach. Let's say suppose if you are talking about the green evolution states of our country, primarily the Western Uttar Pradesh, Punjab and Haryana, right? That's a region.
Yes.
So in a regional approach, you will try to find out the uniqueness of that region and how that region is different from the rest. Let's say different from the rest of the plain area, and different from the plateau area, and different from the mountainous region.
We
So
can identify different features from all these areas, and then we can compare. But since you are discussing about Khap Panchayat and
Hmm.
Riyati in this region,
yes,
why it developed in the first instance,
Hmm.
whereas it is not of that higher degree in the other regions. This is the question.
exactly.
So why is it so?
So it is because primary activity requires physical labor, strength. Man is
Strong,
strong
physically strong.
compared to women.
Right, that's the human attitude foundation. When you talk about attitude foundation, that is primarily determined by the perspective, the way you want to see. For example, a family, once you become an IAS officer, your value will be totally different, not only in the society but in family also. Right? If you become an IAS officer, no guy can ever dare to ask for a dowry from you. Right? Can ever? If you are an IAS officer, your husband is also an IAS officer, can ever he dare to say that I don't want a female baby girl? What will be your reaction? Get lost. Right? So that attitude which has been the foundation of your relationship is coming from what? Sense of equality. Right? I am no inferior to. Even if you are not an IAS officer, that can be there only where the attitude of the society is there.
So societal factor is an important.
Yes, the societal factor is visible factor,
Yeah.
and that visible factor has its foundation in economy, and that economy has its foundation in geography. Like रिलीजन की बात करते हो, फील फ्री टू स्पीक योर माइंड, नेवर हैव एनी हेजिटेशन. जैसे वेस्टर्न यूपी को आप ले लो, वेस्टर्न यूपी इज रिलेटिवली डोमिनेटेड बाय मुस्लिम्स, पंजाब is relatively dominated by Sikh, Haryana is relatively dominated by Hindus, and all three will have great similarity in their cultural aspect. The best example of religion playing the least important role. The female ferticides will be as worst in Western UP and even among the Muslims. They will be so adverse to going for family planning, though citing religion as a reason, but that's not there. That is the visible aspect. They'll quote religion कि हमारे religion में ऐसा मना, वो एक वक्त की नमाज नहीं पढ़ता होगा, लेकिन वो religion को यहाँ पे ज़रूर कोट कर देगा कि हमारे religion में मना है. Religion के जो basic principles है उसको किसी को नहीं मानता होगा वो. Right? रमज़ान के दिनों में दिन में पूरा दारू पी के पड़ा रहेगा वो, लेकिन जब उसके बच्चे की बात आएगी तो बोले नहीं, इस्लाम में मना है. So that is basically a kind of pretense, a protection, a guard of religion taking whatever you cannot do. Now any primary activities, for example let's say suppose West Asia और green revolution states में हमारे यहाँ green revolution states और West Asia के जो economy उसमें क्या similarity है?
Related to primary activity.
Both are related to primary activities. West Asia is dominantly oil region, this is agricultural region. Right? Now what is the uniqueness of these two different regions and what is the similarity of these two? These two are different like in the sense that this region is agriculturally more productive because soil is better. That region is a desert, but you will find huge amount of similarity in their cultural aspect.
So how it has increased the culture? Like primary, how the primary activities are influenced this culture?
Okay, fine. Suppose the best example is that oil की बात कर लो. Oil आपको निकल रहा, बढ़िया से मज़े से आप ज़िंदगी गुजार रहे हो, सारी लग्जरीज आपकी पूरी हो रही. Who will you try to credit the presence of oil in your region? Who will be credited for the presence of oil in that region? जैसे अगर मैं थैंक करना चाहूँ, ये तुम्हारा सिलेक्शन होता है, तो who will you thank? Your parents, maybe your friends, maybe your ability to learn, You'll thank God for making you like this, right? लेकिन अगर तुम रिचनेस तुम्हारी इस वजह से कि तुम्हारे घर के नीचे सोना का खदान मिल गया, उस रॉक में पूरा सोना का चट्टान है, who will you thank? God, right? So that becomes, the religious aspect becomes far more dominant. The moment you are connecting everything, whatever you have, to the unforeseen power. जैसे आप सपोज करो खेती कर रहे हो, forget about that's the easiest example. तुम्हारी गेहूं की फसल पूरी लगी हुई है और अचानक ऐसा बादल दिख रहा है कि लगता है ओले पड़ जाएंगे, तुम्हारी फसल बर्बाद हो जाएगी. तो क्या करोगे? अल्लाह प्लीज़, भगवान प्लीज़. घंटा भी बजेगा, मस्जिद में नमाजें भी बढ़ जाएंगी, मंदिर में जो पूजा वूजा की आरती वारती सब बढ़ जाएगी. प्लीज़ 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 मत देना मत देना मत देना. So that becomes, I'm not talking about, that's generally religion, but that's not religion basically. Primarily it is not religion. Primarily it is the orthodox, whatever belief you have, the traditions you have been following, then you try to intensify that. That's why inward, why inward decay? Because primary society, which is dominantly receiving primary activities, they'll be relatively self-sufficient in their economy. So they'll not be looking outward. If I'm not interacting with you, how can I learn the quality about you? And I might not be understanding my demerits. So the society which is inward will automatically become conservative. Right? The society which is conservative will be giving too much values to traditional aspect, and they will not be dynamic. They will remain static.
That's what she said, and that's what I said. Like she said that in agricultural areas you need more labor and men are needed more. And I also said something similar, like in these disaster-prone areas, you need dynamism. You need help of others. You can't solve a thing on your own. So I think that has also led to these factors.
There are several factors.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about this is the only factor.
Yeah, that helps
But
in dynamism. That's what I'm saying.
Disaster-prone areas will be relatively underdeveloped always.
Yeah, that's why they are more like there's more equality there.
ऐसा नहीं है. When the people grow, some people who are relatively well off, not in terms of economy, but mentally maybe more aware, will grow at a much faster rate as compared to the rest. A society which is, we're talking about egalitarian. So egalitarianism is a process of evolution. Right? When a society, suppose I have reached, as far as geography is concerned, my knowledge, after a point of time my growth will be minimal. If you don't have information, your growth may be a higher percentage. But even after a point, your growth will also be minimal. So that is a different aspect. When you are talking about the egalitarian society, I am talking about society as a whole, a region as a whole. A region as a complex entity, a region as a process to understand. That's the basic problem in understanding this section also. Because you can have several views, and each view may be conflicting, may appear conflicting as well, especially in this section of geography. So when we talk about various aspects, ultimately when we are dealing with man-environment relationship, it is very complex. You can have several ideas. Each idea in itself may be complete, but conflicting with the others. And that conflict creates ambiguity in the mind. For example, if you take the 60s evolution, quantitative revolution को देख लो, behavioralism का नाम सुना होगा, जैसे पर्सपेक्टिव की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो सारा सिमिलर लगेगा और सारे में सिमिलरिटी भी है. अल्टीमेट एम ऑफ ईच जोग्राफर एंड ईच फिलॉसफी इज द ह्यूमन वेलबीइंग, बट व्हाट शुड बी द प्रोसेस ऑफ ह्यूमन वेलबीइंग, दे डिफर. I should have this way. If this way is adopted, human well-being will be best. No, this is not a way. If you adopt this way, human well-being will be different. So when you deal with those topics, like behavioral geography, radical geography, humanistic geography, all these are nothing but ultimate aim of all them are similar, that is human well-being. But they have conflicting ideas, they have conflicting views. So for that, when you try to give example, it should not be from a particular book, it should not be from what you have read. It is possible only when you have understood that. when you have understood the basics of man-environment relationship, when you have understood the basics of the evolution of a society, right? For example, I am talking about that geography has its own play, a region, let's say physical context. It is physical aspect will dominate the population density, any doubt? Right? Will have a different impact on settlement, whether it is the scattered settlement, the compact settlement, or isolated hamleted settlement. So that will be primarily determined by physical factors. It doesn't mean that compact settlement is not the, let's suppose, mountainous region. So the moment we hear about mountains, as far as settlement is concerned, what type of settlement will have it? Sparse. But look at Shimla, one of the most compacted settlement in our country. Hope we are getting that. So when we learn man-environment relationship, there is no one single statement which complete the whole or sums up the whole problem or solution. Gives you one single statement cannot give you entire solution. Basically because that is one creature which is different from the rest. Why it is different? Because different people may have different opinion over one particular topic and can have justification of his her own opinion. Right. So that's what a region, when a region is made in pure physical terms, there is not much problem. But the moment we learn about like for example the general landscape and cultural landscape, landscape, the term is what we can see on the surface. That is, whatever we can see is landscape. Whatever we can see with rest together with human becomes cultural landscape. Right. For example, if we are talking about the mountains, so we have peaks, we have valleys, we have passes. When we see that on the surface, we have grasses, we have meadows, that becomes geomorphology or geomorphological landscape. But when we see that how grasses had been distorted by humans, how that grasses have affected the evolution of animal husbandry in that area, that becomes cultural landscape. Right? So whatever cultural landscape has been formed, how it has been evolved will be a complex phenomena. The same meadows or the same grassland may be used differently by Africans and may be used differently by Americans. Right? May be used differently by Europeans, may be used differently by Indians. Let's say suppose a piece of land, a big piece of land. It's a physical entity, is a region. Now for an industrialist that has a different perspective, that has a different meaning. For agriculturalist that will be a different meaning. For the school going or college going kids that will have different meaning. अच्छा बहुत बड़ा यार, क्रिकेट खेलने में मज़ा आएगा. अच्छा यहाँ पे तो इतना बड़ा प्लांटेशन एग्रीकल्चर अच्छा हो जाएगा. सेटलमेंट वाले को, रियल एस्टेट वाले को कितना होगा. Now whatever we are talking about the 21st century. Now imagine the same in 5th century, imagine the same in 2500 BC, imagine the same in 15th century and 1000 AD. So the perspective will differ according to the evolution or civilizational attainment of a society. So man-environment relationship keeps on changing. Hence a region itself is very dynamic. And that dynamism is produced because of very continuous, regular and intense interaction between the man and the region. Imagine Delhi in medieval period. Forget about medieval period, imagine Delhi in British period before 1911-12 when it was capital was transferred, and imagine Delhi in the present day context. Right? Forget about that, imagine Delhi in 1970 and imagine Delhi in 2016. It's totally different. Right? So that complexities, to understand that itself is very complex. So when you deal with any of the approaches, you should learn to appreciate that. And that appreciation will come from the basic learning of what is the basic aim and objective of a geographer. Right? Basic aim and objective of a geographer is to understand the relative problems and try to pass some solutions. Try to recommend some solutions. Now, that's why it is very different subject as compared to other humanities. When I am talking about landforms, the moment it comes to landforms, so if you are an academician, you will simply think about mountains. You will simply think about plateau, plains and whatever. But when you think as a would-be IAS officer, it has a different meaning. In fact, it has far more meaning than a simple college-going student. A mountain means relatively a resource-rich resourceless region in terms of minerals, in terms of other aspects. A mountain means a sparse population. A mountain means a scattered settlement. A mountain means low rate of birth. A mountain means low population growth. Right? When you think about mountain, a low population, suppose the birth rate is very low. Let's suppose we are having a discourse with a person coming from mountainous area. So you plain people breed lot of children. So what makes plain people to bear a lot of children? That is one aspect. Right? One aspect. You have lot of interaction. When you compare with tropical and temperate, there will be influence of birth rate. The tropical climate influences puberty, early puberty. The tropical climate influences the birth rate in a different and very funny manner, that most of the people can't sleep properly in the night. But in a temperate region, they can sleep properly. In one go, they can completely have sleep. Now, that's one aspect affecting climate, and that can have several consequences. Now, just imagine that you have a whole night very sound sleep. You are bearing less number of children, number one. But at the same time, your day will be far more productive than the tropical people. If you are having a very sound sleep, imagine your day productivity. And if you have 2% or 5% more productive capacity because of climate, just imagine the accumulation of wealth relatively will be much higher. So when your earning is more, now this is becoming economy part. Your earning is more, your saving will be more. When your saving is more, your investment will be more. When your investment is more, your productivity will be more. So that productivity has its root in geography. Right? Similarly, when we are talking about the Khap Panchayat, or for that matter any kind of the social attitude, that has its root cause in geography. Rest other becomes philosophy. अगर हम बात करें एजुकेशन की, कि एजुकेशन वहाँ पे कम है, तो एजुकेशन तो बिहार में भी कम है. आप इकोनॉमी की बात करें तो पंजाब एंड हरियाणा इज वन ऑफ द रिचेस्ट स्टेट ऑफ आवर कंट्री, येट दे आर प्रोड्यूसिंग वेरी पुअर सोशल कंडीशन relatively as compared to look at even Bihar, Uttar Pradesh or Odisha, which is far more underdeveloped economically, but they are producing better social condition as compared to them. If you go by that, then tribal society is worst in terms of economy, yet they are best in terms of social condition. They have much more balanced, in fact positive sex ratio, most of the tribal. That's why they have matriarchal society. Right? Now, one very important sound logical reasonable explanation is when the human, individual or family or a society has contribution in the economic well-being of the family, they will be respected. They will be given their due place. The moment they are given due place, they will have their say in decision-making process. The moment a wife is having a say in the decision-making process, whether a baby girl or a baby boy, female fertility will be least. The moment a girl will not be considered as a burden, female fertility will be least. The moment when the girl is not supposed to be कि मेरा नाक कटा दिया इसने उससे शादी करके, the rate of killing will not be high. The parity will be there. So it's attitude I'm talking about. The attitude of a society is fundamental. I'm not talking about the only factor. Fundamental to look into different social problems, and that attitude has its foundation in economy, and that economy has its foundation in geography. That's how a region is built up. That's how a region will be formed. And when you took that, that's the regional approach. Right? Let's say suppose हम perspective in geography इसके बाद आएंगे systematic approach if you talk about. When? What's your name? Huh? Mahima. Could you get that or do we need to discuss? Don't hide anything inside your जैसे छुपाना मत कुछ भी कि नहीं मैं मेरा कुछ और पर्सपेक्टिव है, सर का कुछ और पर्सपेक्टिव. We can have discourse without any problem. When the economy is primary sector में उसमें मेल डोमिनेंट आ जाता है जब वो ग्रो करने लगता है. अर्लीस्ट स्टेज में नहीं होगा. ट्राइबल सोसाइटी इज द मोस्ट प्राइमरी एक्टिविटीज, राइट, बट दे विल नॉट हैव डिफरेंसेस बिकॉज दे आर बेसिकली फूड गैदरर्स और हंटर्स, राइट. अब हंटिंग हम कर सकते हैं तो मेरी सिस्टर फूड गैदरिंग तो कर ही सकती है. हम जाके सपोज करो किसी जानवर को मार के लाए, हो सकता है 4 दिन में एक जानवर हमको ना मिले, लेकिन जाके पेड़ से फल तोड़ना इज नॉट अ बिग डील. सपोज आई से माई सिस्टर जस्ट गेट लॉस्ट और मे बी माई वाइफ, कोई काम नहीं, जाओ भर में जाओ, हम भी चले जाते हैं कहीं और, हम भी जा करके 4 आम तोड़ के लाए खाएंगे, तुम भी आम खाते हो, हम हिरन नहीं खाएंगे, हम वेजिटेरियन बन जाएंगे. सो द प्राइमरी सोर्सेस का जब डिपेंडेंसी रेशियो बढ़ता जाता है तो डोमिनेंस बढ़ता जाता है. व्हेन यू बिकम डिपेंडेंट ऑन अदर्स, in all likelihood you are going to be exploited. That is human nature. अब वो एक सोसाइटी में जनरलाइज्ड हो जाता है या 2 इंडिविजुअल रिलेशन में जनरलाइज हो जाता है या इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे जनरलाइज हो जाता है. सो व्हेन योर डिपेंडेंसी, दैट्स व्हाई इफ यू लुक एट जियोपॉलिटिक्स की जब बात करते हो तो जियोपॉलिटिक्स इज द एरिया जहाँ पे किसी भी रिसोर्स की वजह से वो एरिया इंपॉर्टेंट है, उसकी डिपेंडेंसी को बढ़ा देगा. जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हो गया वो ऑर्नामेंटल वर्ड डिफरेंट दे देगा, जस्टिस, इक्वालिटी, लिबर्टी एंड ऑल, बट उसका मेन रीजन कुछ और होगा. जैसे आप सपोज करो कि इराक की वार की बात करते हैं, अफगानिस्तान की बात करते हैं आप, राइट. व्हाट इज द नेम? एलिमिनेशन ऑफ दिस, एलिमिनेशन ऑफ दैट, बट अल्टीमेट एम क्या था? रिसोर्स पे कब्जा करना. आप अफ्रीका में देख लो, अफ्रीका में जैसे चाइना का भी डिफरेंट ट्रेल लाइन्स बन रहा है. चाइना इज वेरी वेरी एक्टिव इन अफ्रीका, दैट इज चैलेंजिंग मोस्ट ऑफ दिस. व्हाट इज दिस? अफ्रीकन डेवलपमेंट कर रहे हैं. डेवलपमेंट उनकी नहीं कर रहे हैं, वो खुद की कर रहे हैं. दे आर इनडायरेक्टली हैविंग अ कंट्रोल ओवर देयर रिसोर्सेज, दे वांट टू हैव कंट्रोल ओवर देयर रिसोर्सेज, राइट. सो एक ऑर्नामेंटल वर्ड होता है. सो ए वुड बी आईएएस ऑफिसर कैनॉट गो आफ्टर एंड जस्ट बिलीव इन दैट ऑर्नामेंटल वर्ड. You'll have to go into the root cause. The moment you understand that when a society is growing and the primary sector is growing, after a point of time that will lead to a different social structure, right. अब suppose करो कि एक बहुत छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल मैं अक्सर देता हूँ कि एक एग्रीकल्चर फील्ड को suppose करो मेरे पास we have 5 hectares of land and I have 2 sons and 2 daughters. Maybe daughters are much older, 20 years old, and a son may be 12 years old. If I am not going on my field to take care of my labor, 100 of labor who are working, would I ever be sending my daughters there? कि जाओ तुम वहाँ पे लेबर काम कर रहा है उसको देख दाख लेना. Would I be ever sending? No. Why? Obviously the level of vulnerability. My daughter, I might have in my mind the vulnerability of my daughter in dealing with those labors. लेकिन 12 साल के हम बेटे को भेज देंगे वहाँ पे कि जाओ देख लेना, कोई बदमाशी करे तो मुझे बताना. Getting that point? So that here itself, as far as the requirement is concerned, there is a discrimination, and that discrimination is associated with that factor that suppose she is supposed to deal with. अब suppose करो कि मेरा एक institution है, ये एक IS institution है, I won't hesitate in sending my daughters to take care here. I will never hesitate. Because I know the kind of people she is going to interact with. I'll have lot of confidence in the type of people she is going to interact with. So I'll not discriminate between my sons and daughters. So obviously there is no discrimination in my mind. चलो भाई मेरा business है, उस business में मेरी बेटी भी देख सकती है, बेटा भी उतना हो सकता है बेटी more efficiently देख ले, because she might have much greater capacity and maybe having more empathy, more vocal capacity, more attractive capacity in terms of getting students and all. More convincing capacity because her oratory skill is better, suppose. So I'll not be discriminating. The moment I am not discriminating, they will be equal to me. So I'll never want that I shouldn't have a daughter, I should have a preferred son and all. So female preferred side will be less. So it is the requirement which ultimately forms the basis of the attitude, and that attitude is basically founded by the economic perspective, and that is the main reason for any society to behave in a different manner. There might be several consequences. अब उसमें क्या होगा, एजुकेशन का भी वही आ जाएगा, एजुकेशन विल ऑल्सो बी ए कॉन्सिक्वेंस. So a region is made primarily by geography. Then it will evolve through economy. Geography and economy combinedly will form the foundation for a society. And the way a society is supposed to behave is primarily about a region. Maybe a question mark. It is purely region. अब उस रीजन का इंटरेक्शन कितना है लोगों से, राइट. सपोज कीजिए कि आई मीट लॉट ऑफ पीपल, सो लेट्स वन यूरोपियन, वन अमेरिकन, मे बी वन ऑस्ट्रेलियन. सो माई व्यू ऑफ वर्ल्ड विल बी totally different, much wider, much broader, as compared to if I am confined to my own house and village. I have never visited the nearby village also. Imagine the kind of my mental map about humans, right? So that is very subjective, and that's why subjective environment is far more important as compared to the objective one. How do you perceive things? So that by perceptual environment, as far as the application of geography and a would-be as officer writing is concerned, is far more important than the objective reality or real environment. Systematic approach, that is when we take one activity of human and study that in complete, that is regional approach is defined. That is, for example, here let's say I have taken example of, let's say suppose northern plain. When we are discussing everything, every uniqueness of northern plain and the reasons behind that, that is the regional approach. When we compare northern plain to peninsular plateau, it is again a regional approach. When we compare, let's say India or oriental world to occidental world, that is a broad regional approach. Now when we take a single activity of human and then compare across the region, what has made the distinctive characteristics of one particular activity in different region, that becomes systematic approach or systematic study. Let's say suppose agriculture. So agriculture in India and how it is different from agriculture in Canada, that becomes systematic approach, right? Human behavior in the tropical world of a, let's say suppose if you are talking about the industrial activities in Chota Nagpur plateau and industrial activities in Lorraine region of France or Ruhr-Westphalia region of Germany and France, and the same in Manchurian plateau of China, and the same in, let's say, lake region of USA. So industrial activities, most whatever I have named there, resource rich, right? But there are good number of resource rich region and minerally rich regions, they are underdeveloped. Good number of minerally rich regions which are developed, good number of minerally deficient regions which are also industrially developed. Then becomes systematic analysis. So it is systematic analysis. The best part of system analysis is that it can be quantified. Through systematic approach, the things can be quantified, and the moment you can quantify, it becomes easy to make laws, models, theories, which are very handy in a generalistic pattern to explain things and phenomena and man-environment relationship. Whereas in the regional approach, it becomes descriptive. Descriptive is called what you call idiographic. That is descriptive. This is what you call nomothetic. Nomothetic means scientific. That is descriptive. When you becomes descriptive about a particular region and the wholesome, a region as a whole, then you are studying, and then you are talking about different perspective and the combination of factors which has produced that region. When you take a single aspect and then you try to compare it with the different regions, why it is high, why it is low, then you can quantify it. And that's how it is. The systematic approach has been the basis for law making in geography. Now there will always be a conflict between these two. Like सेटलमेंट में हम लोग पढ़ेंगे कि एक है डिस्टेंस डिके रूल. Distance decay rule. The moment the distance decay, your choice is limited, or you prefer the nearest shop to serve you whatever service you want. You don't want to travel extra mile for any goods and services. That's what we call distance decay rule. For example, if I have to purchase a toffee, right? So if I'm starting from my house, rational आदमी क्या होगा? The nearest shop पे जो टॉफी मिल रही लेके घर चले आओ. लेकिन मुझे उस दुकानदार की शक्ल अच्छी नहीं लगती, सपोज करो. सारा रूल फेल कर गया ना, राइट? लॉ क्या है कि a rational or economic man will always prefer to take goods and services by traveling the nearest distance, right? Now I know that, let's say suppose करोल बाग में सारी चीज़ें मिल जाती, but at the same time I know that Connaught Place में जो पार्क नया बना है वो बहुत अच्छा है. So instead of going into Karol Bagh, I'll prefer to purchase goods from Connaught Place by traveling extra miles, because I have to spend few moments or some minutes in park, right? So that law is failed. Getting that? Let's say industrial location. Industrial location, the most important factor which affects the location of industries is raw material, especially the weight losing industry. Now Japan doesn't have any raw material and they have established industries, right? In that sense, global perspective में कुछ नहीं किया. So when laws are made, systematic geography, obviously it is very handy. For example, if I want to establish an industry, there are some at least set pattern. There are some very small page, 2-3 pages norms, that if you want to establish industry, these are the requirements, you should try to take care of it. So I have a model before me, which can be very handy as an economist for me, as an industrialist for me, as a businessman for me, right? Now, but the moment you compare with system and both are having lot of flaws. Regional approach में आप law नहीं बना सकते हैं, because it becomes too descriptive to make a model. सपोज करो कि अगर जैसे हम एक मॉडल की बात करते हैं, लेट्स से सपोज मॉडल फॉर द फिल्म इंडस्ट्री, राइट? अब उसको अगर हम बहुत डिस्क्रिप्टिव कर दें कि उसकी टांगें ऐसी होनी चाहिए, उसके पाँव ऐसे होने चाहिए, उसकी उंगलियां इतनी लंबी होनी चाहिए, उसकी हाइट इतनी लंबी, उसके चेस्ट इतना ब्रॉड होना चाहिए, एंड ऑल दैट. So if you become very descriptive about that, no man or woman may be able to match that. So you cannot create a model. That's why when we say quantitative evolution, and actually we are dealing with dualism and dichotomy right now. This is dualism. Physical versus human, regional versus systematic, quantitative versus descriptive, all are dualism. That we are trying to branch out. We are trying to create offshoots of a particular idea, of a particular philosophy. Right? So when we compare, there are several approaches, and now that's why it is becoming very complex. Those who might be supporting systematic approach will be criticized by one who are supporting regional approach, and vice versa. Right? So in that perspective, it becomes relatively very complex. Now, why it is becoming complex? Because the perceptual environment. Which ultimately leads to what you call perceived notion, and that affects the behavior of human. Right? Now, for example, that's what we have taken distance example, right? For the physical distance is same, but the perception will be different. Let's say suppose the present day temperature, आज के दिन का दिल्ली का temperature, it's perfectly normal for us because we are used to it. Imagine an African coming to Delhi. My God, it's damn cold. It's bitter cold. मर जाऊंगा मैं तो यहाँ अगर 10 दिन रह जाऊंगा तो। नहीं, imagine a European coming to this, बल्ले बल्ले उनके तो, right? Because they are used to much colder climate, so they'll be feeling great about it. My God, wow, sun है पूरा खुला हुआ, we can have sun bath and all. Physical reality is same. Whatever temperature right now we have 15-17 degrees Celsius, but look at the perception and how it is different. Right? So this perceptual behavior is what you call, that forms what you call mental map. And mental map is very, very important in man-environment relationship. Ultimately, जब भी आप आंसर लिखेंगे इस एरिया में इस टर्म को जरूर आप लाएंगे, because everything whatever we are doing as a geographer, it is basically we are trying to simplify the complex reality of man-environment relationship. Now, in the process of simplification, some might have more simplified, some might have more generalized it, and some might have made it more complex. When we talk about climatic classification, Köppen is relatively general one. The moment you go to Thorndtvedt, it is relatively much more complex. Right? One may have genetic basis, one may have empirical basis. Right? So that's how mental map. Now, if you look at mental map, imagine करो तुम खुद अपने बारे में कभी भी इस तरह से सोचोगे. The best part of geography is that you can be very creative in your writing. और वहाँ पे एग्जामिनर को ऐसी चीज़ें दे दो and tell them through your writing that look, I have the administrative capability. अब मेंटल मैप उठा करके मैप भी डाल दिए और वही जो 4 लाइन लिखा हुआ आसपास में बुक में वही डाल दिए, वो 10 में से 2 नंबर से ज़्यादा नहीं देगा. वो भी बहुत तकलीफ से, अगर बहुत अच्छी राइटिंग मैप कर दिया तो 3 नंबर दे देगा. वो कभी नहीं देगा, because they are not searching for academician, they are not searching for reproducers, they are searching for those who can create things, who can be a part of the policy making, who are supposed to deal with the facts but not be dependent on it, who are supposed to utilize those facts, and that facts will be the basis, but ultimately your decision will be totally different, because फिर वो क्लर्क को ढूंढ लेगा. वो क्लर्क के पास सबसे ज़्यादा फैक्ट्स होता है क्योंकि उनका काम ही है कलेक्शन. इसीलिए आपको बहुत सारे सबऑर्डिनेट्स दिए जाएंगे. The subordinates, the general duty of the subordinates would be to provide you informations, all the factual information, all the data you want, all kind of descriptive information you want. This will be morning में आप कहो शाम तक आपके पास पहुंचा रहेगा. उस डेटा के ऊपर आपको काम करना है. So book is basically a data, syllabus is basically a data. How you can be forming an answer and writing an answer, and what examiner would be searching from you is to deal with that data. How you are dealing with that data, that's what you call creativity. कि क्रिएटिव आंसर होना चाहिए. क्रिएटिव आंसर क्या होना चाहिए? अब ज्योग्राफी में कोई नई थ्योरी तो तुम नहीं निकाल दोगे, लेकिन थ्योरी की कितनी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, and the way you present that, it should look, yes, he or she is the person. So mental map. अब जैसे सपोज करो हमारा मेंटल मैप किसी भी चीज़ के बारे में, जैसे अभी तुमने बताया एक चीज़ कि रिलीजन, दैट इज द मेंटल मैप. अब वो मेंटल मैप कहीं ना कहीं से इन्फ्लुएंस होगा. एक पर्सनल स्पेस होता है, एंड पर्सनल स्पेस के बियॉन्ड फिर इन्फ्लुएंस होता है. सो व्हाट आर द फैक्टर्स विच इन्फ्लुएंस आवर डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस, विच अल्टीमेटली इफेक्ट्स आवर बिहेवियर. जैसे सपोज करो कि आमतौर पे ट्रॉपिकल रीजन के पीपल विल बी वेरी रिएक्टिव. नहीं, रिएक्टिव. दोस्त में कोई सुबह सुबह मिल गया, या शाम में अचानक मिला, बोला आज बहुत अच्छे लग रहे हो तुम, हमारा जनरल रिस्पॉन्स क्या होता है? सुबह से कोई मिला नहीं क्या? वाई? बिकॉज यू टेक दैट फ्रेंड्स इन दैट मैनर कि कब खिंचाई कर देगा मेरी, कोई ठिकाना नहीं इसका, और ये मतलब मजाक करने के लिए बोला हो सकता है। दैट डिपेंड्स अपॉन रिलेशनशिप। अगर बहुत फॉर्मल रिलेशनशिप है, वो तारीफ कर दिया तो यू विल गेट आउट ऑफ के थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू मैडम, गो अवे। बहुत ज़्यादा सीरियसली लोगे नहीं लोगे, डिपेंड करेगा अगेन कि फ्यूचर में कितना काम है उस बंदे से। सो वो मेंटल मैप किस चीज़ से इन्फ्लुएंस होता है? वो मेंटल मैप अल्टीमेटली मैन एनवायरमेंट रिलेशन को बहुत ही सॉलिडली इफेक्ट करता है, जिसको हम कई बार स्ट्रक्चर्ड ओपिनियन कहते हैं। एंड व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट दैट, यू आर सपोज टू गिव एग्जाम्पल अबाउट द एग्जेजरेटेड वर्जन ऑफ रियलिटी। जैसे सपोज कीजिए, एक बहुत अच्छा एग्जाम्पल है, आप निर्भय कांड। निर्भय कांड obviously the worst thing you can imagine in life. There are several Nirbhayas which are still being done, not only in India and all over the world. ऐसा थोड़ी कि सिर्फ इंडिया में होता है। Why that has been highlighted up to the extent, and what is the negative consequence of it? That a structure is being built about a country, that this is the country of the rapist, right? The moment any foreign tourist or foreign investors or foreign companies or whatever wants to come to India, this will be a point in their mind. ऐसा तो नहीं कि दिल्ली में हजारों लड़कियां रहती हैं, राइट? इंडिया में मतलब उस तरह से इतना भी बुरे हम लोग नहीं है कि अगर देखा जाए कि जो भी आएगा उसका रेप ही हो जाएगा। बट इफ यू गो इन द स्पेशली डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड, there will be a factor, this will be a factor in them, in their mind while choosing their tourist destination. इंडिया मत जाना, और खास करके अकेले तो मत ही जाना, kind of thing. They give instructions. So structured opinion. Now you cannot get carried away by structured opinion. The moment you are getting carried away, your answer will be very shallow. You will have to create your own. You will have to reach beyond that. You will have to move into the root cause of it. You will have to form the rational basis for whatever answer you are writing, whatever decision you have taken about an answer, right? So what is the mental map? That is basically the perceived idea of a reality, which is a package formed by several factors. It is this mental map through which humans see and react to the environmental or physical reality. One of the most important aspect of man-environment relationship. अब यहीं से अगर तुम प्रेशर ग्रुप्स की बात कर दो, यहाँ पे यहीं से आप ग्रीन पीस की बात कर दें, एनवायरमेंटलिज्म की बात कर दें, एनवायरमेंटल हिस्ट्री की बात करें, हिस्ट्री ऑफ द एनवायरमेंटल रिवोल्यूशन की बात करें। सपोज वी आर थ्रेटेंड सो बैडली कि दिल्ली में निकलोगे तो पोल्यूशन से मर जाओगे, तो क्या होंगे बाहर के लोग? अगर उनके पास एक भी चॉइस हो, दे विल नॉट प्रेफर टू कम टू दिल्ली। दिल्ली में 3-4 इंसिडेंट्स ऐसे हो जाएंगे कि द ओल्डर लेडी और द ओल्डर मैन might be staying alone in his or her own house and they have been killed or looted. तो आपको अगर दिल्ली और बेंगलोर के बारे में 2 चॉइस दिया जाएगा, you will prefer Bangalore, right? So that mental map. What is the problem of mental map? What is the advantage and disadvantage of mental map?
Mental map advantage can be
पहले एक forget about it. First you learn what are the factors which affect mental map. mental map, first and the foremost thing is the personal space. Is your own personal space, right? That is the individual. Then you have several factors might be influencing the nearest surrounding. That takes to relatives and friends. Right? Then the recreational aspects. खुश हो तो सारी चीज़ें दुनिया में बहुत अच्छी लगती हैं, जिस दिन मूड ख़राब हो हर अच्छी चीज़ भी बुरी लगती है. Right? Recreational aspect. Then you have films. Then you have media. In media itself you have print media, electronic media, etc. Right? Then you go far off places. Right? So interaction. That is level of interaction with the different society. Right? Then outsiders coming to your place, and then your interaction. Technological development and access to it, level of access. Then active pressure groups. राइट? अभी पिज़्ज़ा और बर्गर हमें अच्छा लगता है, मतलब वर्ल्ड ओवर की बात कर रहे हैं. हो सकता है कल को नूडल्स बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छा लगने लगे. मतलब ग्रेजुअली पिज़्ज़ा इज बीइंग स्विच्ड ओवर. तुम लोगों को पता भी नहीं चलेगा अगर तुम खुद को एहसास दिलाओ. इफ़ यू जस्ट बिकम अ वेरी सेंसिटिव एंड रिकॉल योर ओन अपब्रिंगिंग, योर ओन ग्रोइंग एज. नाउ इट इज, हम लोग बचपन में नूडल्स का नाम भी नहीं जानते थे उस तरह से. बड़े हुए तो पिज़्ज़ा बर्गर जानने लगे. अब नूडल्स भी बहुत अच्छे. चाइनीज़ में चाइनीज़ है बहुत अच्छा. आई लाइक चाइनीज़ वेरी मच. यू आर फोर्स्ड टू लाइक चाइनीज़ वेरी मच एंड यू विल बी फोर्स्ड ग्रेजुअली मोर टू लाइक चाइनीज़ वेरी मच. अब जैसे एक डाइटरी हैबिट होती है. अब कबाब की बात करें तो कबाब एक है. अब चिकन कबाब हो सकता है, मटन. वेज कबाब क्या होता है यार? आलू की टिक्की को वेज कबाब बोलने लगते हैं. दैट इन्फ्लुएंस. Now, the moment you have pizza and burger, then thereafter might be noodles. Thereafter might be African dietary habits. It depends upon the influence. That's how the pressure groups works. The way if the economically well-off becomes an undeclared model, and the moment it becomes undeclared model, the people try to adopt it. So that's how the several factors which affect the mental map, and that mental map has its own influence over environmental aspect. Right? अब climate की ही बात कर लीजिए. global warming. Now that mental map, the worst problem is that may be structured one. That's the biggest problem. Yes, maybe far from reality. May be created to manipulate things. Things of real life.
Politics of the.
Obviously, that's why everything become a part of geography.
So this mental map can act as a positive as well as a
Yes, definitely. It is a positive also when you learn, like when you interact, you become more dynamic. But when you mislearn, then but become equally deadly. राइट जैसे एक बहुत सिंपल क्वेश्चन मैं अक्सर क्लास में पूछता हूँ, आज स्पेशली वो कई बार मैं पूछ भी चुका हूँगा, किसी न किसी को कहीं पता होगा, मुझसे इंटरव्यू में क्वेश्चन पूछा गया था कि इन जनरल मुस्लिम्स हैव मोर नंबर ऑफ चिल्ड्रन इन इंडिया. डू यू एग्री विद द स्टेटमेंट? इफ यस, व्हाट आर द रीजंस? ओवर टू यू महिमा, and please feel free to speak your mind.
Could you please repeat the question?
In general, Muslims in India have more number of children. Do you agree with this statement? If yes, what are the reasons?
Sir, I
I
agree.
would. Okay. Please go ahead.
Actually, I agree with you, sir. It is a historical aspect, sir. Not the modern concept, but it is a historical aspect where Muslims were forced to produce more number of the population in order to defend themselves and defend their religion in the Middle East. And that trend has been continued in India also.
Okay, that's one opinion. Good, go ahead.
I don't have facts and figures to my country.
Sorry?
I don't have facts and figures to my country.
No, that's the fact also. Like if you look at this Sikh community, the birth rate is highest among Muslims and Sikhs. And it is slightly higher in Sikh community, but they are highest in Muslims.
I see the economic aspect is more dominating in this thing. The Muslims who are well off, they are comparable to the general public.
Yeah.
So I think there is a more political link up to this question. Because Muslims are generally considered minority in the country, and being a minority, there is a peer psychosis in the minority. That if you perceive the present scenario in the democracy, it is considered that majority rules.
Look at here, when we talk about a particular prospect, a particular aspect which is much, much broader, it can't be an outcome of 2 years, 5 years or 10 years. It has to have its history of, let's say, 50 years or 100 years.
But if we see our scenario, if we see particularly to the Indian context, then we see that, especially after the partition of our country, there is a more different. There is a kind of polarization in our country, and that is very much visible in the different communities also. And
My question is, Muslims have more number of children. Do you agree with the statement? Obviously the question is yes. In general, average number of children is more with Muslims. What are the reasons?
the reason is they want to be more assertive in their politics.
Okay.
Through politics, they want to be more clearly visible or more assertive.
इनफैक्ट यूँ कह लो ना, कितना बच्चा पैदा कर लो कि इंडिया में अपनी हुकूमत हो जाए, हिंदुओं को यहाँ से भगा दो.
This is the
Kind of attitude.
This is the ground reality.
नहीं, you speak out. That's why don't hesitate, please, because my name is Shami Manwar. Speak out your mind. Only then that can be the discourse can be done, and then you can have the cleaning of that.
So that is what the people. That is where the politics. That's how the politics play in our country.
You are not supposed to take on or take things from what politicians have said. That's why you are different.
The second thing is the socio-economic condition is different. So they are very generally they have very high socio-economic
Good,
conditions.
good.
So their level of mental perception of things or education is not. And third one is if you see from the geographical perspective also, they are very they are very far placed situated from the reason. Even in a city also, the place where they reside is very far from the main CBD.
No, I live in the very heart of the Delhi.
Sir, it is not about you, but
No, that's what I'm saying. The general perception should not be a specialized one. Yes, now I hope you can make your opinion. You can pass your remark.
Like I was saying, the Western Asian countries are there. I think population is not that much.
West Asian countries, they're very high. Population growth is very high.
Really?
Yes, it is.
So population has got nothing to do with the religion itself.
That's the aspect, like talking about the political aspect or the, yeah, come.
Okay, like Hindu code bill was
Passed.
enacted for all the other religions, but Muslims were Muslims are guided by their personal laws.
Mhm.
So that basically guides. So earlier population this birth rate was equivalent to Hindus. Hindu Muslims were equivalent, I think, because in Hinduism also polygamy and other things were practiced. But after Hindu code bill was enacted, these instances have reduced. And
Reduced, not eliminated. I hope you have used very good word, that reduced.
yeah,
Yes.
but in Muslims it's guided by the personal laws, where it's still which is still rooted in its traditional things.
Mhm.
So I think that may be the reason.
Hindu code bill is not applied to everybody
No.
else.
No, it's not about code and laws. Laws are meant for deterrence. And that's really, you talk about the Hindu code bill, that is a civil law.
Yeah.
Right, you can't marry. So I will not marry, but I can have 3 wives. There are so many examples, I can give you several examples. I know people. They have not married yet, they have wives.
67 wives.
Right? So that's what I'm saying. As an intellectual, as a would-be IAS officer, your opinion should be based on reasons, should be based on experience, should be based on your learning capacity. That reflects your level of understanding, that reflects your mental capacity. If you look at the downtrodden section of the society across the religion, and all of you would have seen, that's the best part of it.
Economic factors.
Yes, across the religion. Now you are not relying or believing your own experience, what you have seen. That means वहाँ पे वो क्वेश्चन मार्क डाल देगा एग्जामिनर आपको, वुड बी एस ऑफिसर कैपेबिलिटी पे, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव कैपेबिलिटी पे आपके क्वेश्चन मार्क डाल देगा. क्योंकि you must have seen several people across the religion, whether Hindus, whether Sikh, whether Christian, whether Muslims, if they are coming from downtrodden section of the society, they will be having large number of children. You ask your father or maybe grandfather or maybe father of grandfather, if you are very coming from a very affluent background right now, they must be having higher number of children. So it is purely associated with socio-economic condition. Now you are getting carried away by a structured opinion, which you cannot afford, which an IAS officer, which an intellectual group like you cannot afford. Leave it for the politicians, leave it for the जो so called intellectuals होते हैं लेकिन actually में होते नहीं हैं. They try to be assertive. You are supposed to be rational, and you can't represent a particular community, you can't represent a particular region, you can't represent a particular language. Right? You are the citizen of this country, and if you are not, then who will be? The question is this. So your opinion, your judgment should not be get carried away by the structured opinion.
So their level of education is also very low, so they are being exploited by the
Yes, definitely there, because primarily because of socio-economic condition. If the socio-economic condition of any community, any region is relatively poor, they will have more number of children.
because their education level is so low, so they are very much vulnerable to be politically exploited by
Yeah, that's true.
that was
This like political exploitation is different word. Political exploitation does not necessarily mean BJP वाला, वो वैसी भी करते हैं खूब बढ़िया से politician. उसकी जैसे बड़ी बड़ी दाढ़ी रखने वाले भी इमाम को देख लीजिए पास कर देंगे अपना, कोई सुने या नहीं सुने, लेकिन उनको पता है कि मेरा जो पॉलिटिकल सर्किल है अपना वहाँ पे तो एक वैल्यू रहेगी ना. उनसे 50 करोड़ रुपया ले लिए, उनके साथ फतवा इशू कर दिए. So they are vulnerable, and they are vulnerable across the religion. It's not only Muslims. They are every society is vulnerable depending upon that. तो जो स्ट्रक्चर्ड ओपिनियन, जब हम मेंटल मैप की बात करते हैं तो मेंटल मैप जो होता है ये एक पॉजिटिव भी होता है, एक नेगेटिव भी होता है, डिपेंड्स अपॉन योर लेवल ऑफ फिल्टरिंग कैपेसिटी. राइट, द कैपेसिटी टू फिल्टर इंफॉर्मेशन. What is the level of your intellect capacity, your surroundings, your upbringing? That is primarily determined by personal space and this aspect. That's what you call upbringing. And then when you interact, what is the level of your this introvertness or extrovertness? If you are very extrovert, then in all likelihood you will be having much greater filtering capacity as compared to others, or you will be least bothered about it. The best part is that if you look at western states and eastern states of our country, the primary difference, not the only again, for the difference in their development is the level of interaction in the historical past. All the developed countries, whether it is Europe, whether it is medieval period where Arabs have dominated as a developed, all have interacted with them on a regular interval basis. Whether it is Britishers, again they came first from western side. So western coast people have interacted more and more with the rest of the world. It's not that they were superior. It's basically the moment you interact, you learn and you teach both. And that again you are forced to learn, or you are, for example, if I am going to Europe to learn, or somebody is coming to teach me indirectly. So the moment your level of interaction is far, far higher, the society will become more dynamic. And a society which is dynamic will always be more productive. And society which is more productive will always be more balanced, far, far better as compared to the one which is introvert, conservative. जैसे कुएं का मेंढक, एक बहुत पुराना मुहावरा है ना हमारे यहाँ, कुएं का मेंढक, तो उसको लगता है कि दुनिया इतनी सी है और उसको लगेगा कि हम ही सुपीरियर है. The same goes for any introvert society. They'll always feel being proud of this thing, being proud of that thing, जबकि सच्चाई है पर कुछ कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं है उसमें, फिर भी you still feel proud of some small things, right? So that mental map affects a lot the environmental perception and man-environment relationship, and that mental map is generally created nowadays very often to serve the geopolitical interest of a particular force. अब उसको global perspective में भी आप देख सकते हैं. इसमें दोनों पॉजिटिव भी है, नेगेटिव भी है. पॉजिटिव भी है, ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट की बात होती है. सो ऑब्वियसली यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द डायनामिज्म, you can talk about the growth of civilization through a lot of interaction, exchange of ideas, exchange of innovations, diffusion of innovations that has led to growth and development. Then if you see technological efficiency, that most of the world's, those who are discoverers and those who have invented instruments but are being utilized by several other societies, that has improved technological efficiency, that have improved knowledge power, right? और इसी के negative consequences भी हैं, which has been misused at several occasions, like role of the mental map, historical perspective अगर देखा जाए, sea change, right? Why? Because of access to different world. Now we are talking about in the ancient times, obviously relatively least developed, which is there in the tribal society, both positive as well as negative consequences. So mental map in tribal society is very obsolete in terms of human civilization. So that has both positive as well as negative impact. Negative impact of a tribal society, you can write an essay. What are the positive impact? Sorry? Egalitarian, beautiful. A balanced, a much more harmonious relation with nature, much more sustainable, very. So you can talk about that, right? And then present society, if you look at the present society, when we talk about the term, you can use global village itself. When you are talking about globalization, or global world has become a global village. What do we mean by that?
Why village?
Why village?
Why not city?
Why not city? Urban and rural geography dualism. Why not city? Why village? You all have the answer. प्लीज़ ट्राई टू इंट्रोस्पेक्ट मोर, प्लीज़ ट्राई टू ब्रेनस्टॉर्म अ लॉट, वो आपकी प्रोडक्टिविटी को हाईएस्ट लेवल पे ले जाएगा। कई बार ना हम इजी वे ढूंढते हैं, तो आप अपने पोटेंशियल के हिसाब से आप मार्क्स नहीं ला पाओगे। बी केयरफुल अबाउट इट। जस्ट थिंक अबाउट, ए क्वेश्चन हैज कम बिफोर यू, व्हाई ग्लोबल विलेज, व्हाई नॉट ग्लोबल सिटी?
Village is more heterogeneous. It has field and people from different caste and people build area, unbuilt areas. So a world is like village means it will have forest, it will have cities. So you have cities generally have
Compact setting.
Generally, village gives us an idea of being very inclusive.
Exactly, exactly. And village is more compact, more knit, more close.
More harmonious.
Yes, harmonious and very like have homogeneity, much greater homogeneity. So when you learn about, let's say suppose whatever you want to learn, you have on internet. एक बार क्लिक करो, बहुत सारी चीज़ें पता चल जाएंगी। टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन है तो विच आर द बेस्ट डेस्टिनेशन। सो वही थी विलेज में, तो एक्सेसिबिलिटी इज हाईएस्ट इन विलेज, नॉट इन टर्म्स ऑफ फिजिकल डिस्टेंस बट ऑल्सो इन टर्म्स ऑफ ह्यूमन डिस्टेंस, राइट? दैट्स वाई ग्लोबल विलेज। आप शहरों में, एक सिंपल से एग्जाम्पल है कि 4th फ्लोर पे रह रहे हो, 3rd फ्लोर पे शादी होगी, आप भूखे मर जाओगे, वहाँ पे 50 प्लेट खाना फेंका चला जाएगा। गांव में ये चीज़ नहीं होगी। तो दिस इज देयर क्लोज knit, they are well integrated as compared to the city. That's why global village, right? So when we are talking about global village, the mental map in the historical evolution has experienced a sea change, which was very limited to the native area, to the nearest place, or the capacity of human travel distance on foot, to has become the internet speed, or the more than the speed of even sound, right? The possibility of reaching information, which has both positive as well as negative consequences, has transformed the mental map. And that's why if you look at the mental map versus environmental degradation, it has created a sea change, right? Gradually, when the technological evolution, the humans have reached at a level where they can destroy the whole earth itself in one go. नहीं, एक न्यूक्लियर बम छोड़ दीजिए 4-5 बढ़िया सा, अर्थ डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाएगी। सो अब उसके नेगेटिव हैं बट बहुत पॉजिटिव कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस भी हैं। तो पॉजिटिव कॉन्सिक्वेंस, जिसे कई बार क्या होता है ना, मैन को हम सिर्फ डिस्ट्रॉयर दिखाते हैं। एज ए जोग्राफर यू कैन शो एज ए क्रिएटर ऑल्सो, एज ए सेवर ऑल्सो। हम पेड़ को उजाड़ सकते हैं, जला सकते हैं, तो पेड़ लगा भी सकते हैं, राइट? वी कैन डिस्ट्रॉय ओजोन होल, सो वी कैन टेक मेजर्स टू प्रोटेक्ट इट एज वेल। सो जब भी लिखो मैन एनवायरमेंट रिलेशनशिप में, बोथ साइड्स ऑफ मैन यू शुड शो, एज ए डिस्ट्रॉयर, एज ए प्रोटेक्टर। अर्लियर वी वर डिस्ट्रॉयर, नाउ वी आर ट्राइंग टू प्रोटेक्ट इट, देयर आर सेवरल। अब उस प्रोटेक्शन के चक्कर में एक मेंटल मैप कई बार होता है जिसका मिसयूज ऑफ मेंटल मैप, जिसे ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, राइट? सो ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, a myth or reality is a different subject, right? The way it is perceived is a different subject, the way it is presented is a different subject. Getting my point? So that ultimately has its root in economy. For example, I'm not going into the myth and reality, that is again debatable, but if you look at the एक general aspect है कि in the history of the evolution of earth, the temperature has gone up and down. Everybody knows that last glacial age was 10,000 years back, that is Pleistocene glacial period, and thereafter the temperature is increasing, right? And this is global warming period, so there is a temperature decreasing, so before that there must be temperature increasing. So history of earth has itself seen ups and downs in the growth and height and low temperature. When the temperature is supposedly the highest, we call it global warming. When it is lowest, we call it global cooling or ice age, right? Now the way it is being projected, that it is the carbon emission which is creating all these problems. ignoring all the other factors, or at least not giving enough space to other possible areas. So a mental map is being created कि भाई आप जो दिवाली में पटाखे फोड़ रहे हो इसी की वजह से ग्लोबल वार्मिंग आ रही है, जबकि सच्चाई इससे हज़ारों कोस दूर है. लेकिन एक मेंटल मैप सोसाइटी में, एंड एवरीबडी डजंट हैव द कैपेसिटी टू फिल्टर इट आउट, एवरीबडी डजंट हैव टाइम टू फिल्टर इट आउट इफ दे हैव कैपेसिटी. एक तो कैपेसिटी बहुत कम लोगों की हो जाएगी, उस जितने लोगों की कैपेसिटी होगी उसमें से फिल्टर करने के लिए टाइम बहुत कम लोगों को बजाय, जितने लोग फिल्टर भी कर जाएंगे उसको पास ऑन करने के लिए टाइम नहीं रहेगा. तो जो आपको स्प्रेड कर दिया जाता है, एक डीडीसी अपने डीडीटी छिड़क दिया गया, आप मरते रहिए, राइट. So that ways mental map, the way it is being created, that's what you call a structured opinion also, is definitely a kind of the, again comes into geopolitics, resource richness, the capacity to mold the world opinion, capacity to affect the world opinion. So there is again only a few hands at the highest possible level sitting are enjoying the greatest resources. अब कार्बन इमिशन का मतलब क्या हुआ? आप कार्बन इमिशन स्टॉप कीजिए तो इसका एक्चुअल मतलब क्या है? दैट इज ऑर्नामेंटल वर्ड है, स्टॉप कार्बन इमिशन. द एक्चुअल मतलब क्या है? स्टॉप इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन. स्टॉप इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन टू whom? Developing countries and underdeveloped countries. If you are stopping industrialization, this means you will have higher dependency on us. So if you are having higher dependency on us, I can mold your resource direction, the direction of the resource flow, the direction of your input and output, the direction of your import and export. So let me having all the knowledge, I cannot pass it to you, but you can't have geography knowledge because तुमको geography knowledge होगा, तुमको खतरा हो जाएगा, अस्थमा हो जाएगा. ये आप propagate कर रहे हैं, ये mental map कर रहे हैं. So that is the negative use of mental map. एक individual level पे mental map है, एक regional level पे, एक societal level पे, global level पे. तो इसके डिफरेंट लेवल पे ला करके आप मेंटल मैप की भी बात कर सकते हैं. एंड द बिहेवियर ऑफ ह्यूमन विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू एनवायरमेंट और फिजिकल रियलिटी इज डिटरमाइंड बाय मेंटल मैप. राइट. इफ यू लुक एट ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी हियर वी विल बी स्टार्टिंग विथ पर्सपेक्टिव. इट इज ब्रांचेस इनटू टू ग्रुप्स, सोशल geography and economic geography. Social geography is more about population, settlement, etc. Economic is all those activities, industrial, agriculture, transport, etc. Social geography, the way we live, the way we make our living. Now, our effort should always be to bring physical into human, human into physical, social into economic, and economic into social. That's the difference in academic writing and would-be IAS officer writing. You should always try to integrate things to present the reality of a picture or reality of an area so that your administrative capability is reflected through your writing. Every social issue has its root cause in economy and vice versa, right? माँ बाप बच्चे को पढ़ने नहीं भेज करके चाय की दुकान पर भेज देते हैं. डू यू थिंक इट इज अ डिलिबरेट? नो, इट हैज इशू विथ इकोनॉमी. आपको वाकई चाइल्ड लेबर नहीं चाहिए, पैसा दे दीजिए बेचारे लोगों को. जिस तरह से आप अपने यहाँ अमेरिका में आप अपने अनएम्प्लॉयड लोगों को एक पेंशन देते हैं, प्लीज़ प्रोवाइड अस, नोबडी विल सेंड चिल्ड्रन. अगर उसके बाद भेजता है तो उसको जेल में 50 साल के लिए बंद कर दीजिए, कोई नहीं भेजेगा. Do you expect any parents? There are exceptions always, but do you expect any parent to send their children to chai dhabas or any industrial activities if they can sufficiently feed them? Can they properly feed them and properly get them educated? So if the children are not going to school, is it the problem of the parents or is the problem of the government? अभी देख लो आप, enrollment ratio बढ़ रहा है. अभी देख लो आप, stay ratio भी बढ़ रहा है. right? Because we are providing schools at the nearest doorstep. जब से एजुकेशन फंडामेंटल राइट्स हुआ है, आपके इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बढ़ रहा है, मिड डे मील स्कीम है, यू आर ल्यूरिंग, सो पीपल आर नॉट गोइंग. अब उसको पता है कि हमारे बच्चे को खाना नहीं मिलेगा, तो भूख से मरने से तो अच्छा है ना किसी चाय वाले की दुकान पे वो जिंदा रह जाए. Getting my point? So things becomes very, very subjective, and that's how you can integrate. And when you integrate, for example, if you're talking about child labor, you should not project or present the opinion what has been heard by you from someone. Or maybe just you have heard one-sided opinion from media. Then you are simply presenting someone else's idea in toto as it is. That means you don't have the capacity to filter it. The moment it is reflected, your marks will be less. So first topic is perspective in human geography. In human geography. We'll be dealing it with tomorrow. Your task is to think over what is the difference in perspective in and perspective of human geography.